But I'll always be writing. It's the first voice. It's the first expression. I love being in studio. That's why I sometimes do a side stream gig of audio books, just offering my voice. Mostly it's that feeling of be true to yourself. Often the first, in that vulnerable state of growing your confidence as an artist, you emulate like a child. You copy the people that you love, or you try to do your edition of it. I always felt like there was something about the passion and even the sacredness of what I've been gifted and a sense of purpose about why I'm even on this planet.
Welcome to Crossing the Line, a weekly podcast show in which we interview interesting guests about their own stories and about the important issues facing our country, our continent, and the world. I want to thank Mobilearn for the technical support to make this podcast possible. My name is Ryland Fisher and I'm your host. My guest today is Malika Ndlovu, acclaimed poet, playwright, performance artist, etc., etc. Welcome, Malika. Thank you for being here.
Pleasure, Ryland. Looking forward to this conversation.
Yeah, so I like to start off by asking my guests a little bit about themselves. Where did you grow up? And kind of, looking at how all of it impacted on you. And I know you were born in KZN.
Mm-hmm. Definitely, and under another name. So I was born Louine and Conning, and come from two large families.
Okay, so that's where the Louine comes from.
Exactly. So the Malika Ndlovu is still trying to retain and preserve something of that root, because I'm definitely someone who grows exponentially. Born to a father who came from a family of 8 and a mother who came from a family of 12. And her side, the maternal line, comes from the Dunn clan, which is quite a bit of history is known, at least more about that family because of the history with John Dunn in the north.
Quite almost like an infamous family in the...
Infamous is what I'd say.
In KZN.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. And I spent the first 28 years of my life very much in that soil. I'm the firstborn. I have 2 siblings, 2 brothers. And thankfully had parents who understood the creature that I am, giving me permission to really grow and explore. That initially that was drama and theater and my dreams of being on stage in the kind of fame, remember my name kind of way. But always finding somehow a way through writing and creative expression that really was so natural to me. Loving, nurturing parents.
And so how long have you lived, or I don't know if you live in Cape Town still, but you lived in Cape Town for many years.
I migrated in end of 96. And so I spent a 30-year arc of my life, which I've just, closed, I guess, in some way, or created a loop back to KZN, not exactly home, on the south coast this time, in closer to the Port Edward side. And I think that return, in some way, is a lot more about who I am becoming and a call that I can't quite pin down. Not a very intentional, I'm going home, back to my roots, as people might assume or think. And I didn't intend to leave Cape Town, except the need to move was very strong. And I got a clear sense that this was where I needed to go.
And so do you call Cape Town home? Do you call KZN home?
I love the fact that I feel I am someone who has many homes. I am someone who can make myself also feel at home in many places. So anywhere in the world that I've traveled, I've also found or studied, felt the sense of making home and community quite easily and quickly. So it isn't. I have more than one home, and Cape Town is definitely a huge home. So coming back and forward between KZN and here, right now it's still only a year that I've been away. So I'm a lot more at home, even with a property that was our home, still here. So it's also home. So I'm home with you.
Thank you. I mean, obviously, your growing up years, all of us, it impacts on us in our later lives. Some of us, in fact, especially those of us who are in the creative industries, we draw on our growing up years. And is that the same with you?
Yes, I do think that the roots of my first 2 or 3 decades of life, I'm about to turn 54. So it's more than half my life that I've been in this side of the country. And yet the reverberations from our family trees, from our ancestry, from the dynamics that shaped who we were at that time in history, your sense of belonging, identity, and alienation and trauma, all of that, I think is something you never quite, I don't want to say escape, but you're not, the entanglement with it continues. And it's more just about what kinds of self-liberation or healing you have managed to pursue and, navigate since those initial outings of this is who I am, or that's the wound that happened, or this was the loss, or that was the place where I felt this is no longer home. So I feel as though I've been writing about home and my beginnings in multiple iterations, different arts mediums for a very long time. And that has felt like eventually not only healing, but liberation, definitely. Some of the gravity of it.
So at what point, because I was looking to see when I saw you kind of did some like odd jobs, in shops and stuff at the beginning. At what point in your life did you kind of realize that a career in art and culture is what you wanted to do, and specifically kind of performing and writing and
I knew this was who I was from a very young age.
Okay.
I obviously, being born in 1971, grew up under apartheid in a way that none of the schools I went to offered opportunities to study drama or even any visible role model in terms of working with writing or producing for theatre. A career in the arts was just not a visible, tangible option, at least not just in my awareness. I know there were people who came from Durban who went elsewhere in the country and grew in those ways and was even outside of the country. So I was always even known in my family as that performer at the family Christmas gatherings or whatever. And writing and poetry were things I did naturally as a child. I often talk about it as writing as a form of breathing. That with all the kinds of complexities that I felt so aware of when I was really young, and therefore felt the weight of, and my sense of responsibility. I'm supposed to respond to this. I'm not someone who can keep quiet about something that is evidently unjust, or I'm that kid in the family who would be constantly asking the questions, but why don't we speak Zulu? And where are we from? And, so I feel like that way of navigating was already known to my family. I think in the last 2 years of high school, I pleaded with them to take me to a school that would allow me to study drama, because theatre, I felt like that is this performer, theatre life was what I wanted to do. One of the first schools that was offering what we call the Smarty Box experiment of interracial or multiracial schooling was this convent girls' school where I got a bursary and I could go and study drama. So my last 2 years of high school was actually the deep dive into poetry and playwriting and performing, and feeling the sense of affirmation that this is actually possible for me. And then graduated and went to what is now called Durban University Technology, DUT. Then Natal Technikon, and did the first performing arts diploma.
You know, I'm very sorry, but I should have asked you. You spoke about your maternal side in the Dunn family and your paternal side.
So the Conning family has some English ancestry, Welsh possibly, but the Conning great-grandfather landed on the island of St. Helena. So even when I came to Cape Town, I had this sense that I was doing all this through my play, A Coloured Place. I was excavating a lot around my ancestry and had done a lot of research about the Zulu-Scottish ancestry between Kokstad and Mangete in Zululand, and only had a sense that there was something about this island of St. Helena, so that when I migrated to Cape Town, I hoped to discover a lot more, and I did. That my great-grandfather landed on the island of St. Helena, but also met a woman from Cape Town who became that great-grandmother, who was a Benjamin. Those were all names that I never heard in my story and only discovered a bit more about when I came to live here. Didn't get to the island in the 30 years. I can still go. I still want to try. But there are other ways of traveling, as you probably know from some of the things you may have found in my work. I feel that there are other ways of knowing that start to come in.
Yeah.
And those are places I write from. Those are places I conjure whatever artistic collaborations from, and really navigate guided by that a lot more as I age than it is about me wanting to make my next production that's got my name on it. I mean, or wanting to grow a particular product, output, project. I feel as though I've really done so much of that there's something a little more distilled that I'm being called to do at this phase in my journey. None of it's lost, but it's just a different shape.
Yeah. So you've done quite a few things in your career. If you reflect, think about maybe the one or two highlights that really stand out to you.
1 or 2, that's not fair. Out of 30-something years. Yeah. I wanted to also just circle back just a little bit to that moment when you asked about these odd jobs that I did, working, as a receptionist for a chemical company or as an Edgar's cosmetic sales lady. They sound like, who? Who is that? They were really prompted about my need as a young single mother. I was a student or a recent graduate, and I had my son when I was 19, Rain, who's now 34. And I needed to support us. So I was willing to do whatever was necessary. And it taught me a lot about what I absolutely can't do. In other words, I'm not that creature. I will just not survive here. And in terms of highlights, I think I have to harken back. I have to reference A Coloured Place, because there was something about where I was in my journey at that time, where someone like Geeta Patha, who initiated the first South African Women Playwrights Festival, really prompted me to dig deeper around this identity stuff. And when the play happened, it grew in ways that took me to the States, in ways that got published, in ways that led me into academic spaces, in ways that really put me on the map as a playwright or as a theatre maker. And for me to then, not long after, migrate to Cape Town, it felt like I landed with this work as kind of an opening of the way to make more theatre. And also to just explore what else I wanted to do with beyond South Africa. And then just, I think some of the initiation of writing circles or groups of women writers. When I think about highlights, I seldom think about accolades in terms of what I may have had sounded back to me in the form of awards or prizes or acknowledgement. It's more about the things that didn't exist before I came together in some kind of initiatory process. So Weave, the Women's Education and Artistic Voice Expression multi-generational group that emerged out of my first few years of Cape Town has celebrated now its 21st year since its existence. And we have a podcast about that with Woman's Zone, if anyone wants to tune in to hear us reflect 21 years later about what we were trying to do back then in 1999, 2000. With self-publishing Black women's writers in a multi-genre anthology and site-specific performances. I think studying in Amsterdam was also definitely a highlight, because I think just the opportunity to live and explore my own breadth of creativity in a foreign country and be anonymous also, where nobody's asking you, are you Black, are you white, are you colored? This entire vocabulary wasn't there. And a part of me that always wanted to do experimental theater and avant-garde multimedia productions didn't really have an opportunity until then to have a budget, have the time, be in residence at Das Arts under incredible mentorship, to be able to just explore other aspects of my voice and my artistry. So that's definitely was a game changer. And that was also still only in 2000. So it's still lots that happened since. So I guess those are more historical ones.
Yeah. And some of the lowlights?
I don't often think about it in that filter of the either or. I think one of the hardest things along the journey of trying to generate a self-sustaining income from your artistry is still something that artists all over the world have to grapple with. I always grappled with a relationship between what felt like an ancestrally inherited or divinely, orchestrated gift or talent or talents that I would have to commodify in some way. I always felt like there was something about the passion and even the sacredness of what I've been gifted, and a sense of purpose about why I'm even on this planet and how I can serve, that didn't sit too well with what price and how many bums on seats and how can I market or sell this. So I think both that sense of ambivalence around how to sell what it is that I do was tough, because as a parent, as someone growing and needing to take care of themselves, those become essential questions that have to be answered. How am I going to do that in a way that doesn't feel like I'm selling myself out? So I definitely think that now I can think of it more as things growing my capacity and my resourcefulness and my multiple streams of income, rather than, it's the struggle. But it was a struggle for many, many years. And I had a struggle mentality around that. Yeah. Really.
And you're right. I mean, it is a struggle that continues for the majority of creative people. Yeah.
Sure. I do think, though, that when your mentality starts to shift and you start to value what you're doing in particular ways, and you do it consistently well, not dictated by those economic or market domains, something emerges from that difficulty of staying in it over time, where people recognize what it is that you've been cultivating and they start to call for it. And then you have the opportunity to say, well, this is what it costs me to be here, away from my kids, away from home. And know if it's 10 minutes on stage, there's a whole lot that happens before. And also if I'm there and the text is there, you have two different things you're paying for. To grow the confidence to do that took a lot of time.
Yeah. So, you when you started out, you were talking about the fact that there weren't many role models for you. Did you kind of subsequently find role models? Or the people, if you look back over your career, people that you kind of would like to maybe thank for inspiring you in some way or other?
A few years ago, I actually wrote a long gratitude list all the way back to that drama teacher who I felt saved my life in my very kind of existential adolescent phase of joining the school where I could finally study drama and where I could allow some of that gravity to come through and not feel like, is that too heavy? Is that too weird? Finding my voice. So Wendy Nell was that teacher. My theatre mentor was Professor Debbie Lutke. She is still such a phenomenal legend in the sense that there are generations of young theatre makers. John Blismus and I both were mentored, schooled with her in Durban.
Okay.
And several other people who've really gone on to glow in their work in the world, in media, in other industries. So I definitely thank her and Gitanjali Patha, as I said, around the Women's Festival and the constant affirmation of this particular contribution that I could make, that she recognized, just being seen. Ritsa Tenkata was definitely, when you say role models, people might think that you're looking for someone who looks like me only. But it's when I think about how we are grown by the people that we are encountering, it's not always that they come in the body or the shape that looks like, it's not for me as linear or as binary as that. Yeah. I definitely felt profoundly grown, seen, honored, supported, validated, and given permission to go wild creatively by Ritsa Tenkata, who was a founder of avant-garde theatre in Holland. And when I was there around that time, Brett Bailey was also there, Zulfa Otto Salis was also there, Catherine Hennigan. I'm just mentioning some of the South Africans who also came through that schooling of advanced theatre research under Ritsa's mentorship. And he's passed, and I still carry a hand-signed copy of his book, Man in Search of Words, in which he said to me, if you find words, if you find the words, share some with me. This sense also of really great souls who saw more than how old you are, where you come from, those really limited frames that I had been shaped by coming from where I came from in South Africa. And my first encounter there was while the TRC was happening at home. So it was really a pivotal time on multiple levels. My mom, without a doubt, and I'm not just saying that to be nice, I feel like I'm still in awe of the kind of lineage that I come from. Very strong, out-of-the-box women for their time. And I think so that's in my bones.
Yeah. So what part of your life and your career do you enjoy most? Do you enjoy writing, performing, curating?
I feel as though they are inextricably connected. I definitely think writing's always been the foundation. I often used to describe it as a way of breathing because it's one of those that it's a win-win. I benefit so much from being able to be still and to listen and sometimes channel, if you like, what is coming through as writing that then serves in the world, even if it's a commissioned work. It's an outside stimulus, but I still have to go inward in a way that the writing is more than just words on the page or output of a book, etc. So that practice is definitely the main vein of my work. And then collaboration is what I love. I love because I can't do everything simultaneously. You kind of need to anchor or do one of those things, I feel, at some point. And I've worked with artists all across the media. And I love the ones who work with less words. So the visual artists, the dancers, the musicians, the filmmakers who speak in those languages of image, movement, sound. I find there's something about the way our chemistry works together that gives me deep satisfaction. And I've been doing that naturally over many years. Very different people.
So what is keeping, we'll talk a little bit about collaboration again, but what is keeping you busy at the moment?
Well, leaving the city was primarily about leaving a kind of busyness that would help me complete what I felt was a very big next birthing. And that was the offering of my book, Griefseed, which I often say is also not a book. It's a book and it's not a book. It feels like a culmination of many years of understanding what was guiding my work all along. So I used to call that my mantra or my motto, healing through creativity. And as years passed, beginning to understand how deeply therapeutic this creative practice has been in my own life. That when I looked at some people dealing with similar things, how their opportunities to just release that or to transmute it through some creative medium was not available, and what it led to. All kinds of mental health issues, physical health issues, and a kind of weight, a grief that I could read about, read their bodies about. And so spending time,
And this is the talking about
treasure. It feels like Griefseed is a harvest of many, many years of using writing particularly as a form of therapeutic expression, but also sense making. When there's a shattering, when there's a breakdown, when there's a mourning, when there's a loss, when there's a sense of, whoa, look at how this has been happening over generations. How can I name that and hopefully make it visible so that it's acknowledged, and then there's the opportunity to be released, or even we can have the conversations that need to be had in the family, in the community, in the country, whatever it is. And something also which came naturally with the birthing of Griefseed was many people who I felt were already, if I looked around me, doing work that was courageously going to those same places that many want to avoid, which is that extraordinary vulnerability of facing your grief, your sorrows, your trauma, because I believe the only way out is through. And that this running from it is an illusion. It's a building up and suppression rather than expression that is actually making us very unhealthy, and then we pass that on to others. So this contribution is also 12 other people, not only my voice. I invited others into that conversation with me in this book. So it feels like it's a completion in terms of how long it took to make it, and also how much harvesting of pieces from very long ago and more recent. But it's also just the beginning, because it's only come out in Feb. And I'm now beginning beyond book launches. Those are lovely, but this is really about a harnessing or a honing of my practice around that healing through creative expression.
So how's sales going?
We can talk to the publisher about that. Let me just say, I've gotten the best royalty statement that I've ever had in my entire career. And with a sense of just the integrity of actually journeying with a publisher. So I definitely want to honor Karina Jurek from Caravan Press, just around a sense of the integrity of this relationship that we really both understand. And it's a book and it's not a book. And I would love the book to sell because I feel it's medicine. I feel that there's an opportunity for others to recognize themselves in it and to explore. If it's a bag of seeds, is there one little piece in here that could land in the soil of your life, in the place you feel most uncomfortable to go? And be curious about what might grow if you just gave it a little bit of attention, slowed down, listened to your body, to how it feels.
Yeah.
It's happening rapidly. So for me, in that way, the book is doing very well. I'm a little slow to check about bank statements.
Yeah, I was actually going to ask you about what inspired you to write a book, but you've answered it. And so, I believe that arts and culture, poetry, music, etc., can sometimes be therapy that one needs for oneself.
Yeah.
And do you think that this book, Griefseed, could play such a role?
Without a doubt. And I'm also very quick it's not a disclaimer, it's more a clarification to say that a lot of what I'm understanding about this work is what I call remembering or remembrance work. So firstly, I believe creativity isn't only about becoming an artist or developing some refined project or something you study, harness a skill about, and aim for accolades around. We are bodies of creativity. Our bodies are constantly regenerating and showing stories through our ancestry and our genetics that bring a lot more into the story than just who you and I are in this moment. So we are carrying a wealth that we don't actually pay attention to as much in terms of thinking about when I'm not feeling well in whatever way, the healing, I must go look for it outside. For me, it's a reminder or reminder, like playing with that hyphen in between, loosen it up and see if you were to remind yourself around that. How has any creative expression, whether it's cooking, gardening, writing, painting, dancing, making music, how has that made you feel? And how much of that have you done in your life? And how did it feel when you last did it? And how would it feel to do it now? Just to invite the possibility that tapping into your own creativity can be absolutely alchemical for you. I've been doing it my whole life, and it has saved my life more than once. So I can talk about it with a kind of gung-ho authority. For someone who is new to it, that simplicity of saying, this is not about being an artist. This is about the fact that even as you sit still, your lungs are making a kind of orchestral music. Your heart is doing the drum. Your blood is making these rivers and, these sounds that are like flowing water, like we listen to when we put a shell to your ear. Cells are dying, cells are being reborn. There are aspects of us that remember things from beyond being in the womb. This sounds out there for some people, but there's science to back it up if we need to go there for the evidence around the epigenetic trauma and healing, potential joy, gifts, resilience, wisdom, guidance, all of those things. Imagine thinking about your own body as such a wealth of creative potential, not only in the limited ways that we think about what to do with this creativity.
Yeah.
So it's within all of us. And Griefseed is an invitation not to say Malika's got some answers for you when you're grieving, but to sit with take the time, sit with it, see what resonates for you, and see where some of those mirrors or resonances can serve you in your own journey. And it's already been catalytic in the ways that it's landed. It's not a book to read from cover to cover. It's thin, but it's like potent medicine. It needs a lot of breathing spaces in between.
Yeah, no, I mean, quite often people, in fact, read books and they look for solutions.
Yes.
But grief, I suppose, is not something that
It's not about
that's not where you find solutions here.
And it isn't about solving. I think I'm also...
And it's also not about... There isn't one kind of solution for all grief,
I'm guided by nature's wisdom a lot. Even the idea of Griefseed is about the regenerative nature of what happens when you allow your grief to come through, when you give it permission to show up. It's so much more than what we imagine it would be.
Yeah.
The healing is lifelong, and there's no recovery point, there's no quick fix, which for me is a very deeply indigenous practice, in the sense that Western medicine and clinical psychology have done a lot of harm in perpetuating the idea that if you go and talk and have a session, or if you just have a funeral and you give it this much time, you'll be over it, and you collapse when that time passes and you're not done, or it's not done with you. So I'm really deeply informed by the fact that we don't teach children right from the start that it's not only old people who die. It's not only grief that happens when someone dies, that life and death are in this inextricable relationship. And it's always happening. It's happening in your body. It's happening in this moment. It's happening constantly in the world, and our ways of being with it take a lot of courage. And at the same time, that's where the healing and the recovery, which is not an end point, but the ways of recovery are available to us. They are. And nature's a phenomenal teacher in that regard, but we're not paying so much attention to that as a big human race on the planet, as you can tell. Nature's been telling us these stories all along, that there's not only one way to do something, there's not only one way to heal, that time is not linear, you're not supposed to get over the finish line. It's cyclical, it's seasonal, it's relational, it's through connection with others, it's finding out where the disconnects are and figuring out what can grow in that space when we slow down and make the time.
Yeah. So one thing I noticed about this book, it deals with quite a weighty topic, I would call it, but I found it wasn't difficult to read. It wasn't filled with anger, but more with humanity.
Thank you.
So did you kind of set out to write this book in a way that it was almost written in a light way, even though the subject is quite heavy? I don't know if I'm making sense.
Sure, I hear you. And I think that's linked to what I've just been saying around a kind of getting out of my own way. So this, I think about creativity as something coming through me, not mine. So the idea that I would sit down and conceptualize something isn't how I've been practicing for a very long time. I know that phase of thinking that's how it is, that's how it works, and being schooled even in that way at some level. But there's something about the way I have been, I guess, unschooled around humbling myself and emptying myself about my own ideas of what something should be. Yes, carrying this training and the skills and the experiences that I've composted, that have grown me to a kind of ear for it and an eye for it, the aesthetics, the techniques, the literary devices, all of that. But that feels like that's really in the soil. It's in the soil of opening myself to what I intentionally want to do. What every book feels like I've birthed something, I've given something from my soul to the world. It's a very intentional process. And here and now, or then and there, when COVID, for example, gave me this opportunity to be in lockdown, I really felt like just looking at those paralyzing statistics of bodies and bodies and bodies and mass mourning and the conversations around grief becoming more mainstream, and every second person wanting to curate or collaborate around something that could hold people, and people hold themselves even at home or online, really felt like a highly generative, it felt like it was an answer to a question I was already walking with. How can I be of service now? Because I can't have a workshop with holding people in a group, and I can't go and do a poetry performance or curate an event with people. How can I do this? And everything felt like it was resonating with this, is it finally time for us to have the grief conversations? Where it's not such an like, why are you even taking us there, Malika? Why do you want to go there? And why are you always on about the grief and the trauma, the wound? And for me, the wound is also where the medicine is. This is the alchemy of that creative practice in response to it and the listening. And that was really a highly generative time in which this kind of surfacing, if I could say, I have a lot of unwritten, unpublished work, or they had been published in limited forms, but pieces that started to connect with each other in quite organic ways around the idea that I, as I said, been living with for a long time, healing through creative expression, but how I felt so aware of how nature was holding all of us, how nature regenerated itself when humans got out of the way, how a sense of us returning to our basic humanity, of spending time with each other, even if it was reluctantly locked down together, of even children and parents, of different ways of schooling. There was something about that reconfiguration that felt restorative, even though there was great loss happening. My ear was also to what is growing here? Our sense of empathy and compassion that also all over the world, it's not those people over there who've got so much or who are so different, who are so other. Everybody was being foundationally impacted, as close as your breath. So I started writing poems about it or looking in my archive for what was useful from the past. And I started working with Corpus Moolman as an initial editor to sound out new shapes for things that may have been prose that turned into poems, And I always knew that there had to be images where words end or where there are no words or where you need a breathing space between all these words. Some kind of sanctuary where you could just exhale, just digest. So that's how the images also came into the book. And listening.
I'll ask you about it now, but most books get judged on, or their success is judged on how many copies you sell. I somehow suspect that this book, the success will be judged on something else.
Absolutely.
What is it?
Absolutely. Already since February, I have had a tide of extraordinary opportunities to have grief conversations. I'm calling them pods. So we're doing a podcast, but I think about the pod in terms of a seed pod, with something of immense potential that can even look dead on the surface, as in, why would I want to go there? Is actually part of a regenerative cycle. So I'm interested in coming into intimate conversations, small groups, one-on-ones, not as counseling or psychotherapy, because that's not my schooling. I understand a lot about those concepts, but I'm more interested in how, when we make time for grief conversations, something even in listening to each other's stories, something in how somebody else's story lands in your own body, something about how my story resonates with other people, that is leading to invitations in which, yes, they may buy 50 copies for all their students, or they may ask to host an event in which I talk and everyone has one in their goodie bag. That's lovely. And I need that. I want that. I want it to travel. But I've never, with any of my work, pursued literary. I'm an interdisciplinary or transdisciplinary artist, and I've never pursued the literary form or prizes or competitions in that way. So I don't have that wiring around its success. For me, the fact that it's so rapidly calling in these opportunities, even before the book came, there were conversations that were about, the imminent arrival of Griefseed, and people saying, there are a lot of people asking for how writing processes can serve grief beyond journaling, wanting to make shapes with it. So whether that's different forms of writing genre or... So it's been growing, and I feel... It feels like a harvest time, and it's only a few months old. And it's certainly a harvest for me personally, to see that all that I can say all that I've been through, or all that I shaped, that I thought, oh, well, a few people enjoyed it 20 years ago, what's its use now? Something of that work is still alive, and very alive for people for whom it's the first time they're reading or hearing it. So it's a different kind of energy exchange and economy. And I'm happy to go slow, because that's another fundamental principle around it. I imagine in terms of copies, couple of years, that I'll say 1,000 copies have sold. A couple of hundred have probably, I can check with. But it's how I often even write in the front of the book, may this offering land softly and deeply in the soil of your being. And for me, that's not just sounding poetic. I know that it's not easy to go to the places that we need to go in terms of our healing. I'm about to enter a conversation with a whole group of people who are focused on reconciliation and reparation, and how, if any form of leadership needs to, people are growing in a leadership curriculum, shall we say, where does grief come into that? And honestly, in the world we're living now, where is grief not part of that story? It's everywhere. COVID is not even something that we ever got over. So there's an impact in terms of how we're relating, the griefs we are carrying, the way we navigate, the way we run from it, the way we say, oh, well, it's those people over there, it's got nothing to do with me. All of that is still very much part of what we're needing to pay attention to. And even processes of reconciliation, far from done, evidently. And the genocide, plural, genocides. Some are more amplified than others. Some are made more visible than others. And the narratives around them are also harming us in disconnecting us from what's happening here, saying it's over there. So I invite those conversations, and the work is actually calling me into them, the book as a tangible reference point, rather than all this work I've been doing, which is hard to identify when you can't have something tangible to say. This is a starting point. Let's circle around this. So in that way, it's the time for it.
So you've always believed in collaborations, and you've spoken earlier about some of your collaborations. Maybe just talk to me a little bit about how the collaboration around Griefseed came about. And I'm probably, yes, you've got a couple of writers, but you also have
visual artist, a doctor, a medical anthropologist, and a media person.
Yeah, so talk to us a little bit about it.
Sure. You actually pointed to it so beautifully by saying there are multiple griefs and there's no one solution or cure or remedy for the complexity of our griefs and the simultaneity of them. That we could be mourning the loss of an immediate family member while we are carrying a deep sense of grief around what's happening in other parts of the world, or the accident with a stranger on the highway on the way to school. So how these multiple griefs sit and land in the body and help to, invitations to rehumanize that connection of empathy, of just paying attention as opposed to just moving along. I found that there were several people that I had either worked with in small iterations before, or people who I saw doing big bodies of work consistently that seemed to be ready for that conversation. They were already doing it in some way. So, for example, Caro Bijou, whose work is the cover of the book, it's an image that she took on a site where she was working. And I love the fact that it's so abstract, that people ask, are those birds? What is that? Is that a lily pad? Is that the sky? It's all of those things. It's open for interpretation. And it is literally her taking a photograph. She works in large-scale, site-specific works. Some of her bodies have worked with recycling materials, so it's obviously stuff around the grief around the planet and all that kind of harm. And then the initial body of work I invited us to talk about is a body that she had built a dome in the Karoo in Richmond. And that body of work was called Silence as a Room. And it was a lot about our grief around land and belonging and forced removal and efforts at land reclamation and our griefs that sit in the soil. So she was already languaging that in visual images that I could definitely recognize. And I invited her, we'd collaborated before on her Dreams as Revolution work. And I loved her language, I want to say, in terms of that visual composting and integration and reimagining of the things that we think are dead or broken or lost or waste or not useful. She just had a way of translating that, which felt exactly what I'm trying to do around Griefseed. Imandra Petty is somebody who obviously is central and in the media space. And whether it was her Power FM talk, Courageous Talks, or her books around becoming Iman, or Sermons of Soul, which were the intros to those Power Talks shows, and just her courageous journalism. She has been in the front face of stories that I often thought, oh, my sister, how do you go home and get over that and be with your family and still find your effervescence? There's a pace at which that industry forces you to keep producing, showing up, looking good, drawing the information together, editing, and on the fly. It's a kind of extraordinary resilience in which some people do it almost on autopilot and some continuously bring their heart to it. So for me, she's somebody who has by virtue of how she keeps showing up in those spaces, has invited other people to also really open their hearts, offer their stories, have quite healing conversations in a space that you wouldn't expect to have them necessarily. A very commercial space sometimes, a very hard space. So I invited her in. And all of these 12 people, I asked, don't write affirmations or endorsements for me about my book. Tell me how, if you were to read this manuscript, live with it for a few months, how, firstly, does it land for you personally? And how can you see that being of service in the field in which you work, in the spaces that you operate in? And in a way, it's also a way of making sure that once the book has already begun to do this, we have had events based on the conversations that happened in the book with those individuals. So I've had that with Pregs Govender, I've had it with Makosazana Tlaba, with Barbara Boswell, where the conversations that were ignited in the book with their voices there are now being unpacked in bigger groups so that we can really bring those conversations and messages home in a more personal, intimate way. And it's been profound. It's felt more like rituals of building community resilience also, even though that's quite a dirty word. It's overused. Maybe community empathy, empathetic conversations, and restorative conversations. So that's how they came to be in the book. And then some of the participants are in the States, in different parts of the States, because I'd worked with them in different ways before. And it's mostly looking at how everything is also connected. So you would think, what has that medical anthropologist, Tobani Kambela, got to do with this media person or that poet or that visual artist? It's liberating us from the boxes that we form around, it's, the base level of whatever it is we do out there. In here, it's just you and me, human beings, with stories, with families, with wounds, with grief, with memories, with archives of creative resource that can serve. And stripping that all away to bring these conversations to the foreground has been so nutritive for everyone. I get my deepest reward out of that. It's ironically places where some people feel exhausted, depleted, afraid. I feel really energized. You can tell.
Yeah. Can we maybe talk a little bit about your creative process, writing process? Do you, like me, I sometimes sit for days, weeks, thinking about what I want to write before I actually start writing?
Yes.
Or does it just flow for you?
It comes in multiple ways. So one thing is I don't think of writing as sitting still. I think that's also like an image of the writer is with a journal or at the computer or maybe in a cafe.
Yeah.
I feel like writing is a listening practice. So I'm mulling when I am doing the dishes, when I'm walking on the beach, when I am in a space where I can see a public space in which I'm just observing people moving by. Our writing comes from lots of mulling, I think, of dreaming it in and of making note of the idea or a little sketch or a note on your phone to capture what feels like, okay, that feels potent, like I want to capture that line or that idea, or I must remember, note to self, join the dot between that story and this story. But a very kind of echolocating is how I think about it, things that resonate for me. I'm listening for them everywhere. And it's not, and I think what's drawing it into resonance is the fact that I'm clear. This is what I think I'm writing about, but I don't confine how it's supposed to unfold. I don't imagine, thankfully, I'm not whipped by any, someone who's expecting me to produce like an academic output where there's a deadline. I have been journeying at my own pace. So I am able to allow the inspiration to come in multiple ways, and then to allow also, even when I have that impulse, to sit down and write. I journal all the time because I know that it's a bit like just letting the river come through. Not everything's going to be fabulous and useful that comes through that process. But there is a lot that comes through, and I'm not even trying to write. And so I can go back to those journals or those notebooks and say, or that mind map I made, and come to it differently 6 weeks later. And I realize, actually, I've been working hard, because now all these things I've been churning about, and even the dream I wrote down, somehow fits into this matrix, and it's starting to take shape. So it's also a very mycelial, I would say, kind of process. It's lateral. It's not a linear, here's the chapter or the frame. And even knowing what's the beginning and the end, this is a very circular or spiraling shape. You could enter this book from any entry point, in the middle, at the end, what seems the end in terms of page number. But it feels like it's an open invitation. And I love that way of writing, where, in a way, I'm really listening for what wants to be told and what feels like it would have resonance for other people.
I remember one collaboration from a few years ago was the one you had with Tina Scow and Ernestine Dean called Woman Tide.
Woman Tide.
What was so special about that collaboration?
Oh, just those two sisters. Ernestine Dean and Tina Scow are prolific artists in their own rights. And we came together, we had an awareness of each other's work, but hadn't worked together around 2004. And all our kids were at the same preschool.
Oh, okay.
So the kids got us together. We kept saying, we should do a gig together. Oh, I saw your show. It was amazing, but not really. And then somewhere around the mummies and the toddlers got together once and realized, oh, wow, there's a lot that we could actually do together. And we started having these regular gatherings. And developed beautiful friendship, and out of that shaped the concept around Woman Tide. So more of her hip-hop influenced dub style, even reggae influenced music, and Tina's jazz and folk influence. And I always used to use my voice to embroider, make soundscapes, but I never thought about it as singing as such. But I really stretched myself in that collaboration to own that voice, to own that singing voice, because I was in the presence of these two, that's their strength, really, and their musical expressions. So it was a very beautiful journey. We did have an LP out, or a CD called Yemaya's Call. Didn't have much, limited budget, short time. People bought it at the runs of the show, but there was a really, for 8 years, we did multiple editions, corporate gigs, government gigs, people's, private events. And mostly it was just this joy of affirming the feminine and the kind of chemistry between our different forms of artistic expression.
So you haven't written a play in quite a while. Are there plans in the near future for another play? I think you only wrote 2 plays, eh?
Actually, I wrote a few that were before a coloured plays, and some of them are actually even in a pool of Black writers at Harvard University, which is a lovely thing to tag. But theatre was my first love. Theatre was my initiation in terms of my professional career, even though I was writing poetry since I was a kid. In 2008, I did Sister Briani at the Baxter. And it was also published via Junkets Press, and the amazing Roman Milan, who has just recently passed. I don't know about theatre as a space I will return to. I feel like I did a lot that was in a theatre space, not necessarily plays. So I had poetry productions, I had multimedia collaborations. I feel like possibly I still love that space. It's a first love, but not necessarily to perform or to write in the form of plays. I am almost, and my heart says, don't say it's over. But it's not where I am.
Yeah.
No.
So you've achieved quite a lot in your career. What else is there that you still feel you want to achieve? I mean, what future plans do you have also?
I want to travel more with the work. I want to, I had a phase of lots of traveling and then a whole range of personal life experiences and motherhood. Now my sons are grown. I have the opportunity again to travel more. I love to see how this can land outside of just outside of home, outside of South Africa. Because I do think there are universal themes and threads. As I said, it's about humanity, and grief is certainly not specific to our location. But I'll always be writing. It's the first voice. It's the first expression. I want to do more collaborations, more even possibly large scale. The element of ritual, that actually is what theatre's excitement was always for me, bringing together these very, co-creating a space, a site in which some magic can happen. And even something therapeutic can happen. People come in, they feel the impact of a play, they sit collectively and resonate around it. They talk about it for weeks later. It shifts something inside their hearts and minds. There's something about that I still think all the art forms that I'm still working with can do. I have for the longest time wanted to be in studio recording some of the soundscapes that I have been using around my poetry. So create a more, an audio version of my work. People often say it's lovely to read it on the page, but it's the way you sound it out, Malika. It's the way your voice works with it that really is what, moves me. So I enjoy that too. I love being in studio. And so I sometimes do a side stream gig of audio books, just offering my voice for reading other people's work. So that's definitely something I want to, it feels like it's on the close horizon. But mostly I want to continue expanding almost the ripple effect of having circles of people entering these conversations and growing collaboration out of that. Not assuming that it's me bringing something to a circle and people just feel it and share and then leave, but looking at what's come out of the soil of that encounter. What do people want to grow? Because that is definitely something I've realized almost as an afterthought, or looking back rather in retrospect, that I have been a kind of midwife for a lot of people's birthing of their projects, their debut collection or poetry book or first manuscript. And I wasn't intentionally aiming to be a reader or a curator in those contexts, but it has been happening, and I keep that's happening still, where people sound out their work with me. And some of it is actually linked to this grief. Things that they hadn't written or spoken about are coming out in creative forms. They sound that back with me, and it grows in another way. So that kind of regenerative cycle is happening organically, and I'm excited to see what else can happen.
Yeah. So my final question to you is, what advice would you give to young people who might be inspired to follow in your footsteps?
Stay close to home. So what that means is it's fine to have role models, inspiring sources outside of yourself and elsewhere in the world and online. But there's literally nobody else like you. As unique as your thumbprint is your voice and your form of creative expression. So figure out what that is. Go in there. Follow the people who are already doing the thing that excites you. Be brave enough to ask the question of, can I shadow you? Is there something, are you holding a workshop? Because sometimes that's not even what people are thinking of doing. But when the invitation comes from someone who wants to learn, something happens. mostly it's that feeling of be true to yourself. Often the first, in that vulnerable state of growing your confidence as an artist, you emulate like a child. You copy the people that you love, or you try to do your edition of it. I would say really go deeply inward and think about what really lights your fire. And remember that another consolation that I often even used in creative writing workshops when I used to run them is to say, there is no original idea. How liberating is that? So stop trying to be there is no new. It's all not been done before, like been there, done that. What it means, the only thing that's new is you, is your way, your lens, your voice, your form of expression, your vocabulary, and your moment in time. Like you are not randomly born at this point in time on this planet, in this country, in this history, in this family. There's something about that particular constellation of things that is part of how you discover a sense of purpose with what it is you want to do. And if you're trying to be famous and commercial and make a lot of money, off you go. There are lots of examples of how that's being done. That's not what I'm doing, so I can't be an advocate for that. For me, artist is, in some ways, it can be seen as a career or a profession, but it's a calling, it's a vocation. It's the animal that you are. And it's the thing that keeps you going even when all of those external things aren't in full flow. It's the thing that keeps you doing this because it's who you actually are. And it's a beautiful discovery to find that in yourself and know that it can't be taken from you, and that you can gift other people with it. To see what grows when you give it to other people. It's immeasurable.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ryland.
Thank you so much for coming in and for sharing your wisdom and your experiences with us.
Thank you.
Thank you for watching Crossing the Line. We welcome your input. If there are suggestions and things we could do better, please let us know. If there are guests that you think we should be having on the show, please also let us know. Please follow us on all social media platforms, TikTok, LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, etc. I want to thank once again Mobiland for providing us with the technical support, and for the technical staff behind the scene who do things that make me look good. My name is Ryland Fisher, and it's been a pleasure hosting Crossing the Line. Until next time, goodbye.